Cause, a principle, aim, or movement that because of a deep commitment, one is prepared to defend or advocate. Karibu. Karibu is a Kiswahili word that means welcome. Welcome, you found yourself in a peaceful place, a place where you can grow and develop, and we hope grow and develop to your fullest potential. This is a podcast that we hope will expand your mind and raise your consciousness. Welcome to The Cause, conversations on music, history, and democracy. There was a kind of frenzy and extra local vulgarity to rhythm and blues that had never been present in older blues forms. Suddenly, it was as if a great deal of the Euro-American humanist facade African-American music had taken on had been washed away by the war. Rhythm and blues singers literally had to shout to be heard above the clanging and strumming of the various electrified instruments and the churning rhythm sections. And somehow, the louder the instrumental accompaniment and the more harshly screamed the singing, the more expressive the music was. Blues had always been a vocal music, and it must be said that the instrumental accompaniment for rhythm and blues singers was still very much in the vocal tradition. But now, the human voice itself had to struggle, to scream, to be heard. Reiland Rabaka, Blues People, the Black Experience in White America, and the music that developed from it, 1963. On today's episode of The Cause podcast is devoted to rhythm and blues and the civil rights movement. Over the next 2 episodes, we have a civil rights music series. Part 1 will be rhythm and blues and the civil rights movement, and part 2 will be rock and roll and the civil rights movement. Buckle up and strap in and get ready to ride the rhythms and blues of the civil rights movement. Once again, welcome to the Cause podcast. This episode, Rhythm and Blues and the Civil Rights Movement. We're talking about what I call civil rights music. This podcast, Rhythm and Blues and the Civil Rights Movement, will examine classic rhythm and blues in relationship to the overarching aesthetics and politics of the civil rights movement, strongly stressing the notion that Black popular music in essence serves as a barometer with which to measure the political, social, and cultural climate in Black America. In this episode, classic rhythm and blues will be critically engaged as one of the major Black popular music mouthpieces of the civil rights movement. It will be argued that even though classic rhythm and blues obviously built on and borrowed much from classic gospel and its freedom songs subgenre, at times it lyrically and musically expressed views and values that coincided with the gospel aesthetic, and then at other times, lyrically and musically, it conveyed qualitatively different, if not new and novel, aspects of African American life and struggles during the civil rights movement. Flying in the face of analyses that downplay and often diminish the connections between Black popular music and Black popular movements, this episode of the podcast challenges those scholars and students of Black popular music who speak and write about classic rhythm and blues as though it was not significantly grounded in and grew out of the politics, poetics, and aesthetics of the civil rights movement. Are y'all ready for rhythm and blues and the civil rights movement? So on this episode of the Cause podcast, we are going to explore the relationship between music and politics. That is one of my great causes. If you look at my body of work, particularly my musicology, I am really interested in the politics of art and the art of transformation. This is for all of my students listening. I am really interested in the politics of art and the art of transformation. How can art be used to raise our consciousness? And what if I am saying my parents' generation, the civil rights movement generation, those black baby boomers, are you with me? They were using music to raise consciousness. And that's actually one of the pillars, one of the frameworks for this entire podcast. Whether we turn to the civil rights movement or the women's liberation movement, we are raising consciousness. That is a positive and proactive thing. But on this episode, we are looking at this connection between politics and music, between music and social movements. Check it out. Please listen up. Rhythm and blues and the civil rights movement. So in my book called Civil Rights Music, the Soundtracks of the Civil Rights Movement, I identify 4 soundtracks for the civil rights movement. I repeat, 4 soundtracks for the civil rights movement. I believe that African-American protest movements or social movements, African-American Black protest movements are unique in the fact that they are often singing movements. And they have singing leaders. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. sang gospel and freedom songs. Fannie Lou Hamer sang gospel and freedom songs. Singing leaders, leading singing movements. So that's one of the major concepts I want to share with you all today. We're going to focus on one of those 4 soundtracks of the civil rights movement. And those 4 soundtracks are gospel, freedom songs. So those are the sacred soundtracks of the civil rights movement. And then the secular soundtracks of the civil rights movement, rhythm and blues and rock and roll. 4 soundtracks overall of this incredibly unique social justice movement that took place between 1954 and Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination on April the 4th, 1968. Whether we turn to the abolitionist movement or the New Negro movement, the civil rights or Black Power movement, the Black popular music emerging out of the movement under consideration most often provides a mouthpiece for and a map of that movement. Musical texts often double as historical, cultural, social, and political texts that chronicle and, however codedly, critique many of the most pressing problems of the movement and its epoch, which is to say, there is more than merely a casual relationship between Black popular music and Black politics, Black aesthetics, and Black ethics. At the heart of the connection between Black popular music and Black politics lies working class and underclass Black youth, who pioneered and popularized every form of post-enslavement Black popular music, from the blues and ragtime to jazz and gospel. Consequently, the history, culture, and struggles of working class and underclass Black folk, especially Black ghetto youth, should be at the heart of any serious analyses of Black popular music and Black popular movements. As a matter of fact, much of what historically has been and currently continues to be called Black popular culture is nothing more than Black ghetto youth culture, or at the least, some derivation of it. Ironically, along with being the primary producers and practitioners of Black popular music, Black ghetto youth have consistently served as the foot soldiers and very often the shock troops for the mostly middle-aged and middle-class leadership of post enslavement, Black social and political movements, from the Black Women's Club movement and the New Negro movement through to the Harlem Renaissance and the Civil Rights movement. For instance, and you know I like to break things down for you. Class is in session, so come and get your lesson. For instance, with regard to the Civil Rights movement, who can deny the pivotal role Black ghetto youth played in the Montgomery bus boycott, the voter registration movement, the sit-in movement, the Freedom Riders movement, the Albany movement, the March on Washington, or the Selma to Montgomery marches? The point that I am making here has to do with the fact that Black ghetto youth are often rendered invisible when and where we come to African American political thought and social movements. But these same youth are usually rendered hypervisible when and where we come to Black popular culture, especially what is perceived to be the vices and vulgarities of Black popular music. We could say something similar about rap music and hip hop culture today. I'm just doing it to you in your eardrum. Needless to say, Black popular music conveys more than vices and vulgarities. If one listens to it from a perspective that is sensitive to the lives and struggles of Black ghetto youth, then, and perhaps only then, a whole new world, a whole new archive ripe for critical analysis is opened up. Often Black ghetto youth's music, aesthetics, and politics are engaged, validated, and invalidated, utilizing either Eurocentric or Black bourgeois criteria. This tendency reeks of a kind of dubious double standard that working class and poor Black folk have long resented when and where their music, aesthetics, and politics have been examined by bourgeois scholars and critics. By grounding my analysis in the lives and struggles of working class and poor African American youth, by sincerely and sensitively attempting to understand the ways in which they have historically used music as a prime medium through which to express their views and values, in the fashion of implicitly singing what they cannot explicitly say, and by resituating their sonic reflections and expressions within the wider context of African American social thought and popular social movements, and African American history, culture, and struggle more generally. Here I explore classic rhythm and blues as one of the major Black popular music conduits for Black ghetto youth's contributions to and their critiques of the Civil Rights Movement.
Are you ready to dive deep into the rich histories, cultures, and arts of Africa and the African diaspora? At the Center for African and African American Studies, affectionately known as The Cause, we're leading the way in research, arts, and student engagement at the University of Colorado, Boulder. The Cause is more than just a research center. It's a space where students, faculty, artists, allies, and activists come together to explore African and African American experiences, from historical legacies to modern cultural expressions. And at the heart of it all, our students, playing a central role in everything we do. They're the future of this important cultural legacy, working side by side with faculty on groundbreaking projects and events that impact not just the campus, but the community and wider world. Research projects and events that impact not just our beloved CU campus, but the community and world at large.
Our mission? To foster academic excellence, social responsibility, and artistic expression, with programs that inspire leadership and advocacy for social justice. Whether you're interested in visual arts, music, or deepening your understanding of African American culture, The Cause is the place for you.
But we can't do it alone. The Cause relies on the generous support of our community to continue making a difference. By giving to the Center for African and African American Studies, you help us expand research, create opportunities for artists, support our students, and drive meaningful social change. And right now, your gift will go even further. All donations will be matched by CU Boulder Chancellor Justin Swartz for up to $1 million or until May 30th, 2026. To make your impact today, visit colorado.edu/center/cause and click on Support the Cause. Every contribution, large or small, brings us closer to a future of unity, knowledge, and transformation.
So, if you're looking for a community where history, culture, and creativity converge, visit the Center for African and African American Studies at CU Boulder. Come join the cause and be a part of a movement for unity, knowledge, and social change.
Learn more and give today at colorado.edu/center/cause. We can't wait to welcome you to the cause.
So part of what I argue where we talk about rhythm and blues as a soundtrack of the civil rights movement, it's really important to understand rhythm and blues as an electrification and an amplification of the blues, of the old blues. So what we're calling rhythm and blues really could be called the new blues, the post-war blues, the blues that emerged after 1945, so after the end of the Second World War, and you have African Americans interfacing with these new society and this new technology. So the emergence of rhythm and blues coincided with the World War II migration of African Americans from the South to the Northeast, Midwest, and West to escape racial oppression and dehumanizing Jim Crow laws. African Americans also migrated from the South during this period in search of better economic, employment, and educational opportunities, leaving their dream-destroying jobs as sharecroppers, general laborers, tenant farmers, washerwomen, and domestics. An estimated 5 million African Americans moved out of the South between 1940 and 1970. However, these migrants quickly found out that the Northeast, Midwest, and West were not the promised land. Although they did, for the most part, find higher paying jobs, especially in wartime industries, life in the new cities was generally just as racially segregated and devoid of civil rights as it was in the South. Anti-Black racist redlining quarantined African Americans to segregated and impoverished communities, i.e. ghettos, effectively turning their dreams into seemingly never-ending nightmares as more and more Black folk sought refuge from the new and unfamiliar forms of Northern racism in alcohol, drugs, promiscuity, gambling, and other illicit activities. By the end of the migration period between 1940 and 1970, African Americans had become a city-centered and urbanized population. In fact, as African Americans entered into the Black Power movement years between 1965 and 1975, more than 80% lived in cities. 53% remained in the South. Furthermore, 40% lived in the North and 7% in the West. It could probably go without saying that all of this would ultimately impact the origins and evolution of rap music, hip-hop culture, and the hip-hop movement in the late 1970s and early 1980s. From rhythm and blues forward, virtually each and every major form of Black popular music has been city-centered. But astute African-American musicologists might also emphasize jazz's city-centered roots, and that is whether we discuss its southern city origins in New Orleans or its Midwestern city origins in Chicago or its northeastern city origins in New York City. Unlike the spirituals and the blues, which captured and conveyed the sights, sounds, and sorrows of African American life during the enslavement, Reconstruction, and post-Reconstruction years. Jazz, ragtime, and rhythm and blues reflected African American simultaneous post-enslavement segregation, industrialization, and urbanization. No longer predominantly widespread throughout the rural regions of the South, Black popular music in the 20th century symbolizes African Americans' transitions into urban environments, whether North, South, East, Midwest, or West. However, even as they moved from rural regions to urban environments, anti-Black racism fiendishly followed them and reared its ugly head and horns at seemingly every twist and turn. So here, what we're talking about is a quote-unquote old blues being more acoustic and lo-fi, and this new blues with these incredible rhythms that the electrification of instruments can help. You have this new rhythm and blues, which sometimes I call it polyrhythm and blues. I hope y'all are listening to me. So you have all these different rhythms coming together. And it's almost as if the electrification of the blues and the amplification of the blues, it's almost as if African Americans are trying to be heard over the sounds of the city. So they move from the South to the North, the Midwest, and the West. And when they got where they were going, they found out that racism followed them, that they were not fully free. And so when you start thinking about the civil rights movement, one of the soundtracks, especially for the civil rights movement, Motown. Motown took these sort of youths, these young folks from the ghettos and cleaned them up. And it's almost as if they were like little earth angels. If you look at those early photos of the Supremes, or you look at those early photos of Marvin Gaye or the Temptations, Motown was called the sound of young America. It wasn't called the sound of young Black America. It was the sound of young America. Berry Gordy, the mastermind behind the Motown sound, Motown really wanted to share the human condition, the Black human condition, this Black experience. He understood that there were some incredibly universal things about the African American experience, even working class African American experience, even underclass African American experience. And he wanted to share some of that experience, some of those values, some of that worldview with the wider world. And one of the ways he did it was by packaging that experience in these young Black folks' bodies, their rhythms, the way they talked, walked, dressed, wore their hair. I won't bring up how debonair Marvin Gaye looked. I mean, did you ever see those 1960s Marvin Gaye album covers where he was looking almost like a Black Sinatra? I better stop. He was so smooth, right? And he wanted to croon a little bit, he says, like Billy Eckstine. You know, he wanted to croon a little bit, like Johnny Hartman. I could do this all day, but we ain't got all day. And if you think about Diana Ross and the Supremes, no one would have known that they were from the Frederick Douglass Projects. The way the Motown cleaned them up, glitzed and glammed them up, right? Sent them to social etiquette school. I know it's called etiquette, but social etiquette school, right? This is a fascinating thing. And if you just think about Motown's inroads into the music industry in the 1960s, the way the Supremes outsold the Beatles and the Rolling Stones in the 1960s. That's fascinating because to a certain extent, African Americans were desegregating the American music industry in a way that they wanted to desegregate American society. I'm going to just let you sit with that for a moment. This whole notion of sonic desegregation Motown as a form of sonic desegregation, mirroring the African Americans' quest during the civil rights movement for social desegregation and integration. When we start thinking about some of these iconic figures in terms of rhythm and blues, whether it was Ben E. King, who, as an anecdote, his song "Stand By Me." Yes, I know for many people in the white suburbs, they were hearing a love song. But for many of the young African American civil rights workers, when they would play that song on the radio, it was a song of solidarity. Stand by me when I'm marching. Stand by me when I'm protesting. Stand by me when they hose me down with the fire hose. Stand by me when I'm bitten by dogs. I'm beaten with billy clubs. So there's a double meaning in the music. So the music is actually message music. Rhythm and blues serves as a soundtrack. Do I need to bring up Aretha Franklin's Respect? I mean, I don't care whether you were male, female, straight, gay, white, black. Respect spoke about what so many people in the United States of America desired. And that is why that song was not only an anthem for the civil rights movement, but it also became one of the major anthems of the women's liberation movement. Respect. And in this way, we can see some of the connections between the civil rights movement and the women's liberation movement. Wow. But now we talking about civil rights music, and we talking about rhythm and blues as a tool that the civil rights movement members used to desegregate America. There were some folks who would listen to the music coming out of Stax, out of Memphis, Tennessee. So they would listen to a group called Sam and Dave. They would listen to Otis Redding and Carla Thomas. They would listen to some of these iconic Booker T and the MGs. This is incredible music. And they were playing it all across the airwaves. I mean, just think about some of those early rock festivals. You had Otis Redding playing right alongside the Rolling Stones. In fact, we know the Rolling Stones got a hit record, you know, of Otis Redding songs. And we know Otis Redding got a hit record off of a lot of the different kind of sound that Sam Cooke was putting out there in the world. Of course, when we talk about civil rights music, we also need to talk about a Sam Cooke song called "A Change Is Gonna Come." It came out in 1963. This was Sam Cooke's last great record, and how that was adopted as an anthem for the civil rights movement. There are so many songs that were really, really popular in the 1960s, right? During those movement years, they had double meanings, multiple meanings. That's what we mean by civil rights music. The multiple meanings of this music. And in fact, if we fast forward, that's why a lot of rap music has multiple meanings. It means one thing when they're playing it in the suburbs of Boulder, Colorado, and it means a whole nother things when we make it back to the hood, when we in the barrios, the ghettos, the slums, the public housing projects. Let me say, I'm gonna shout out Eminem, even the trailer parks, all throughout the Midwest and the South as well, where we got some young white brothers and sisters and gender nonconforming folk. They're also listening to rap music, and they're also finding their voice, right? Their values, their views, and this thing called rap music and hip hop culture. And so now you can see in my work, there's an arc. There is a continuum from rhythm and blues and rap music and hip hop culture. Hey. All right, now we've reached the part of the show that we call the poetic pause for the cause. Today's contribution, today's donation, today's offering, because this is a gift, and I hope you will accept it in the spirit in which I am giving it. Today's poem, it's an original. It's called "Remember Rosa Parks." Remember Rosa Parks? She sat down so we would stand up. Before Bob Marley and Peter Tosh called us to action, singing "Get Up, Stand Up." Rosa Parks inspired little school children with Afro puffs. She was radical and defiant, even if she was poor and riding on a racist city bus. What lessons can we learn from the life Sister Rosa lived? Which one of us will dare give half of what she gave? Challenging us not to be 21st century slaves. Remember, Rosa Parks. She never accepted the world the way it was, peaceful as a lamb, calm as a dove. She criticized shiftless and shuffling Negro men. She warned both black and white America that accepting segregation was their greatest sin. It is never easy to bid farewell to a faithful warrior, a sister soldier who caught the hearts and minds of so many, a humble human soul who shocked us with her unique audacity. But this is that parting hour where we celebrate and mourn in the same bittersweet moment. Remember, please remember this blues for Rosa Parks. Remember Rosa Parks. She sat down so we would stand up. All right, we have come to the end of this particular episode of the Cause Podcast. Here, we have been focusing on rhythm and blues and the civil rights movement. Major takeaways I'd like to leave you with. It's really important to understand that for African Americans, if not for other people, struggling people around the world, music is so much more than music. What I've tried to do here today was to explore some of the extra musical elements of Black popular music and rhythm and blues in particular. It was really important to talk about the evolution of the blues from classic blues into rhythm and blues. There's also a middle period, which I did not discuss. The bridge between blues and rhythm and blues was called jump blues. So that really connected that older form of the blues with this new sort of post-war, let's say 1945 forward form of rhythm and blues as it evolves. Notice at the heart of this thing called rhythm and blues, we still have the blues aesthetic. There are still songs of sorrow and songs of celebration. There are songs about him doing right and him doing wrong, her doing right, her doing wrong, them doing right, I said it, and them doing wrong, because there's a lot of rhythm and blues songs about love triangles. I hope y'all don't know nothing about that. Anyway, so this thing called rhythm and blues, this amplification, this electrification of the blues, and it is this thing called rhythm and blues that eventually is going to evolve into rock and roll. We all know that rock and roll, to a certain extent, was nothing but rhythm and blues going to the suburbs, the crossover, if you will, of rhythm and blues. And so that's going to be on the next episode that we're going to do on rock and roll as a soundtrack of the civil rights movement. But with respect to rhythm and blues, I want you to see this arc from some of these iconic early rhythm and blues artists and some of the compilations, classic rhythm and blues compilations out there, major work that's happening. So when we start thinking about classic rhythm and blues, I'm thinking about artists. A lot of them are going to be from New Orleans, because we all know that that is one of the real citadels, if you will, of rhythm and blues. I'm thinking about artists like Shirley and Lee. I'm thinking about the Trenaires. I'm thinking about the Cadillacs. Obviously, we have to talk about Chuck Berry. Yes, Chuck Berry. Bo Diddley, Smiley Lewis. There's just so many of them out there. Wait, one of my all-time favorites, Screaming Jay Hawkins. I'm going to repeat, Screaming Jay Hawkins. So this whole notion of screaming and shouting being part of that rhythm and blues aesthetic, yes, it's there in the blues aesthetic, but because of the amplification and the electrification of the music, the human voice is pushed to an even higher. And so that's where you get these iconic screaming, shouting singers like James Brown, like Ray Charles, who was more of the moan and the groan, if you will, even though everybody knows Ray Charles was influenced by Nat King Cole. Man, it was like, he's like Nat King Cole on steroids though, vocally, right? That moaning and groaning that takes place all throughout there. Fats Domino, one of my all-time favorites, right? In terms of this music, just really, really incredible. Amos Milburn, also somebody who I just really can't nobody do it like. Anyway, Lloyd Price, Slim Harpo, Little Richard, Big Joe Turner, the Drifters, the Coasters, the Five Royales. I could be up in here all day, but we ain't got all day. You ain't got all day, you know? But there's so many of them. Champion Jack Dupree, Little Junior Parker, Clarence Gatemouth Brown. I'm talking about music here. Can y'all hear me? Jimmy Reed, Hank Ballard, whew, Clyde McFadden. Oh boy, I'm getting happy. James Cotton, Ike Turner, Memphis Slim, Roy Milton. I could do this all day. I'm just calling the roll up in here today. What about Ruth Brown? Ruth Brown. They said R&B. This was the queen of R&B. Ruth Brown and Laverne Baker, because you know you gotta have the sisters, right? Ruth Brown and Laverne Baker. Well, anyway, I done called the roll for y'all today. This is the Rhythm and Blues roll call on the Cause Podcast. And we hitting you in your eardrum today. Oh, once again, thank you so much for listening to the Cause Podcast. As you all know, I conceive of this podcast as a public classroom. And this is public scholarship, and this is public intellectualism. And because of all of that, we are open to dialoguing with our listeners, with our audience. So it's very dialogical. Yes, I'm using a $5 word for you. That just means instead of a monologue, we conceive of this podcast as a dialogue. So we want to hear from our listeners. We want to hear from our audience members. We want you to be active and to be proactive. So please send us your letters, send us your comments. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know some of the important causes that are close to your heart that you're willing to really stand up for. Really, really important. You can reach us at thecause@gmail.com. I repeat, thecause@gmail.com. I'm going to spell it out for you. That is the CAAAS@gmail.com. The Center for African and African American. So AAA, holla, AAA, come save me. I'm stranded by the man, you know. Oh, that was one of my favorite Aretha Franklin songs, Save Me. Oh boy, if y'all want to listen to some music. Anyway, my podcast producer, Mr. John Arnold, make my mic sound so nice. He's got a playlist there for you, sampling of some of this civil rights music that we've been talking about in this episode. And we're going to do something similar for our rock and roll and civil rights music episode part 2. So please stay tuned for the next installment of our civil rights music podcast series. We want to thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us today. Take care. And remember, class is in session. So come and get your lesson. Peace.
Thank you for joining us for the Cause Podcast with Dr. Reiland Rabaka. If you'd like to contact Dr. Rabaka or the Center for African and African American Studies, email cause, CAAAS, @colorado.edu. For your letters, questions, and suggestions regarding the podcast, email us thecause@gmail.com. CAAAS. We may even read your letter on the air. The Cause podcast with Dr. Reiland Rabaka is produced and edited by John Arnold and is a production of the Center for African and African American Studies, The Cause, at the University of Colorado Boulder. For more information, visit us online at colorado.edu/center/cause, CAAAS.
Class is in session, so come and get your lesson. Ooh, the Cause podcast. I love that. Do you love that?